enough reason not to get it. Member of Parliament for Denton and Reddish. As some of you will have seen, there have been some changes to the formal rules for APPGs, which will affect all APPGs right across Parliament. Essentially, the new rules will crack down on the number of APPGs members can be part of, how many members a group can have, as well as tighten up administrative processes. Now, I know that Charlotte, Owen and Chris and the rest of the team over at Future Men are looking into this to ensure that this APPG remains compliant and will communicate any changes as and when they occur. Now, we've got a fantastic session lined up for today. Before we begin, however, I want to highlight that there are some incredibly exciting developments that the team over at Future Men are working on, including Agenda Dad, which is a new online initiative. And I'll hand over to Chris Stein from Future Men to explain more.
Yeah.
It's good to see the technology.
I didn't know what word. I'll just start down a bit. Hello, everybody. Chris Stein from Future Men. And yes, last week we had the launch event for Agenda Dad. The purpose of the meetings online are to convene as many voices as we can around three particular policy agendas. The first being mental health screening for fathers. The second being fixed paternity leave, around which there's already significant and sizable efforts being made. So our role in that is really to get behind and boost that agenda forward. And then the last is around birth registration. And the idea behind all of this work is to collect, as I said before, one cohesive voice so that when we're coming into the APPG, we've done a lot of background work as an organization, but as a collective representing fathers across the UK, with the view to leveling up the policy landscape for all fathers. The next meeting will be with Mark Williams, who's on this call today. Hello, Mark. And we'll be talking at that point about mental health screenings, and that's on October 3rd. It's a lunchtime session. Do follow Future Men on LinkedIn or go to futuremen.org, where we'll be sharing out all the information. As I said, the launch event was very successful. We were on there, and as Owen said at the beginning, nobody was there to listen to Owen. Certainly nobody was there to listen to me. Few people may have been there to listen to Future Men, but actually everybody was there because the issue of fatherhood and families and empowered families making empowered decisions, that's the core agenda that everybody's working to. So if we can all keep the focus on that, I'm sure that we can get the rock going down the hill. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Chris, and anything folks for me from Griffin. Sounds like the launch event went really well, so I'm really pleased about that. I think that that's going to be a really good tool as well for dads. So I look forward to seeing that progress and become successful. And well done. On to the substantive business of today, we are exceptionally lucky to be joined by Jess Lancashire, CEO and founder of From Another, which is an organisation that supports working parents to meet the emotional and financial needs of their families. Jess has 15 years experience as a corporate management consultant in the public and the private sector, and From Another was founded in the wake of her own experiences as a parent returning to work. From Another is a space that aims to listen, research and implement a workplace culture that sees family and parenthood as an asset rather than an obstacle. So today Jess is going to give us a background to her story before going into more detail about the importance of workplace flexibility. We'll then have an opportunity for a Q&A session afterwards. So without further ado, over to you, Jess.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here with you all today. I'll just wait for the presentation to get loaded up. Wonderful introduction. You've almost taken the first 5 minutes away from me. So yes, I'm Jess Lancashire, CEO and founder at From Another. Let's go into the next slide, Charlotte. So our vision at From Another is we want to build a world where no one feels torn between their work and their family. And our hypothesis is that it's not that family and work don't mix, it's that it just hasn't been normalised in enough organisations. And so what we're working towards through our research-led solutions are actually courses and tools that enable parents, managers and leaders within organisations to develop the solutions they need to hold these really important identities in equal balance. I'm joined by Solveig Biddle, our COO. Chris did tell me how much you love data and research. So I had hoped that Dr. Jade Richards, our in-house anthropologist, would join us. She had a prior commitment to her nephew's 5th birthday, so that's what she's off doing. But if there is anything that we can't answer here today, we'll take it away and we'll come back to you as soon as we can.
You see, family and work, don't they?
Exactly. So I really love learning from Chris about the work that you guys are doing. We've had some really interesting conversations in the summer. I think the things that have really stood out to me, I think the first thing is your focus on those real structural barriers that exist and impact not only individual fathers' perception of their identity, but also impact amongst key stakeholders, key institutions and key organisations that are working and engaging with fathers too. And I think what resonates with us at From Another is that this is really about tackling those root causes, not treating the symptoms, but actually how can we change mindsets and skill sets for people so that we can make sure that the change we're driving is the change we want to see, rather than solving a symptom which actually bakes in the inequity that we've already got potentially. So what I thought might be helpful today is, next slide, Charlotte, is if we look at, I'd like to tell you more about our listening programmes at From Another and what we mean by listening programmes, because again, I know your interest in data, your interest in the research. And then I'd like to take you through our flexible work listening programme, almost as a case study to demonstrate how we take that data and research and use it to design those interventions and to illustrate the insights, the new data that we can gather from them. And then I'll finish with the story of Ram. So Ram is a father that we've spoken to through our listening programme. And I think what's really interesting about Ram's story is, first of all, it brings the data to life, which is always helpful. But I think the other thing it demonstrates is actually just how insidious many of these barriers are. And we can talk about that in more detail. I'm going to talk for about 15, 16 minutes and then really happy to take any questions. Would love your reflections, your thoughts on what might be useful going forward. So do you want to go to the next slide, Charlotte?
Yes, I'm just concerned because there are a lot more people registered than have joined the talk.
Okay.
I'm just going to come out of this and just see if there's anyone in the waiting room then. Is that all right?
That's absolutely fine.
Sorry, do that.
We thought it was going so well.
Oh yeah, so they can't see the slides.
So if you do share screen, yeah,
Okay,
and then from,
and then it'll be that.
yeah, there we go.
See that one?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And now we can see all of them.
Yes, and then is there anyone waiting to join?
It doesn't look like.
No. All right. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry, if you can see the slides now, can you just put a thumbs up to your camera, please? Fantastic.
Okay. Okay.
Two
there
thumbs
we
up.
You never have
Thank
these
you. Sorry
problems
to
when you
interrupt.
don't.
So a little bit more about me. So I've always loved going to work. And actually the first salary job I had was between my GCSEs and A-levels, and I actually worked here. I worked just round the corner in Dean's Yard. I worked in the accounts department of the House of Commons, processing MPs' expenses, of all things. I've always been really passionate about the work I do. I have to admit, the processing the accounts was not the expense. It was not the most exciting job, but I really it was the first step, I think, into building a career that's taken me to lots of interesting places and enabled me to do lots of interesting things. So I'd spent about 20 years working in some of the largest organisations in the world. And by the time I hit my early 30s, I'd actually ticked off a lot of my aspirations. So I was director at G Healthcare. I put myself through my MBA. I had a lot of ticks in boxes. And then I met a man and I fell in love. And over the course of about 3 years, there was a huge amount of change in my life. I know.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, carry on.
So next screen, there we go. So I married a military officer. Next screen. And then we had our first child, very swiftly followed by our next one, Charlotte. Okay. And then final one on this, we moved to Devon as well, which is really beautiful, but about 1 million miles from anywhere. Now, I was one of 10 directors in our part of the business, and I was the only director with preschool children. And what became apparent was that actually my 24 hours started to look very different to that of my peers. And so even though I was the person that still led on our large national complex programs, I couldn't finish off work in the evening. You know, somehow the kids always knew there was something I needed to do and they'd start throwing up or sort of doing something different. I couldn't stay on for the impromptu dinner. My husband was deployed for the first 18 months that I was a mother. So if the children were sick, I had to stay home. I couldn't change my schedule at short notice. So my day and my life seemed to feel different to my peers. But I was given a huge amount of support by the organisation that I could continue to progress. And in fact, by the time I went on maternity leave with our second child, we had a plan in place that meant when I got back from maternity leave, I'd progress on to partner. So by the time Owen, our second child, was born, after about 12 weeks, I actually went back to work 1 day a week just to keep my hand in. So I was really committed to my career, you know. And then I got a call. So about 3 months after that, it was September, and my boss rang, and there was going to be a lot of change in the organisation. And the really important thing was that they weren't going to be able to give me the flexibility that they had so far. So it was time for me to go. So I didn't want to be somewhere where I couldn't be successful. So I took the voluntary redundancy. I ended up spending far more time with the kids than I planned because they just didn't sleep. And then I started to look around for what next. And what I wanted was a place where I could do the work I loved and meet the changing needs of my family. And conversations would always start really well. Organisations loved what I did. They thought I'd be a great fit. They wanted more female leadership in the organisation. And then as the conversations progressed into how I would do the job, the constraints would start to emerge. But I'd need to be in the office at least 3 days a week. But I'd need to be able to travel anywhere in the country. But I'd need to be able to change my schedule at short notice. It just wasn't possible. So I came to the conclusion that if I couldn't find it, I was going to have to build it. And that is what we've done from Another. We have built an organisation where we've thrown out the rule book around how you do work. We are an entirely remote team, and we have normalised flexibility across the organisation. So we have, everybody is working in a slightly different way within a framework that ensures we have cohesion in what we're doing. And we're finding our way through this. So I come to the work from Another, both as a parent who needs flexibility at work, but also as a manager and leader who's trying to cultivate the environment in which people can succeed as well. So can we go on to the next slide? Lovely. So what I would like to do next is tell you a little bit more about our listening programs. So what do we mean by a listening program? A listening program is quite simply our research from Another. Everything we do is research-led. We call it a listening program for a number of reasons. Firstly, listening is actually where we started. So this started as a blog called From Another Mother, where we were sharing the stories of other parents combining work and parenthood, because that was the thing I had found most useful when I became a mum. The other reason we call it a listening programme, is I think it makes it far more accessible for people. So when we invite people to participate in a listening programme, actually it places them at the centre of the process, rather than telling them that they are research subjects that are going to be pushed through a process in some way. So I think it creates far more equitable space for people to come and share their experiences. And the final reason is because that's literally what we do. We listen. We think incredibly carefully about what are the questions we need to ask. We take an anthropological approach, so we tend to answer very open-ended questions. And we listen, so we use a combination of surveys, but also extended one-to-one conversations, where we promise people they're not going to be interrupted. We guarantee their anonymity, so they can tell us exactly what they feel and what they've experienced. And the thing that we've learned over the 2 years that we've been doing this is that it's like turning a tap on, and that actually you don't need to ask many questions, because it's not very often we give people a safe space where they can come and tell us what it's really like. And it flows out of them. And the things that they tell us are such a privilege and really give us insights that I just don't think you can get unless we have the space that we are starting to create it from another. So what I'd like to do is talk about our most recent listening programme, which was all around flexible work. And I think that will show you the steps that we've taken to gather the insights that we now have around that. So next slide. Actually, no, sorry, back on Charlotte. So what we always do is we always start with, what does the research already tell us? So the research already told us that flexibility is a paradox. So for every benefit you get, there's a potential disbenefit. So people save time commuting, but then they potentially become more socially isolated. People can work asynchronously, but actually potentially lose collaboration across teams. So we knew that. The research articulated that very, very clearly. We also knew things like between 60 and 75% of people generally prioritise flexibility over pay. And we were also seeing that in some industries, if you weren't offering flexibility, you had to increase the salary by around 25% to secure the talent that you wanted. So these were the things that we knew. The things we couldn't find in the research. The first was, if we know it's a paradox, it can go one way or the other, what is it you can actually do in an organisation to tip the balance in favour of the benefits? We didn't have an answer to that question yet. The second question we asked was, what do we mean by flexibility? So next slide now, there we go. So there is a lovely list online from the government about what flexible work is. And we've got job sharing, working from home, flexi time. And I looked at that list and I thought, do you know, when I was trying to find a place that would give me the flexibility I needed, it wasn't any of these things. So actually, what is it that people mean when they talk about flexible work? So we had two questions we really wanted to answer. We heard from over 350 parents and managers across the UK. We spent 110 hours just listening to them, hearing their stories, hearing their experiences. And we answered our question, so how do you tip the balance in favour of the benefits? We answered our question around what people mean when they talk about flexibility. And there were some things that surprised us too that I'll share with you. So first of all, let's talk about how do you tip the balance in favour of the benefits. So the single most important thing an organisation can do to tip the balance in favour of the benefits of flexible work is role modelling. So when we analysed the data, when we pulled out all of those experiences of successful flexible work, the thing that they all had in common was the person had someone else showing them how to do it. And this shouldn't surprise us. You know, as human beings, we look to other people to show us how things can be, how they can be done. I think what's interesting in organisations, when we think about organisational structures, the implications of this for organisations that want to embed flexibility within their workforces. Let me go on to the next slide. Oh, and next one. It's exciting, isn't it? So most organisations look like a triangle. They've got senior leadership at the top. they've got management in the middle, and they've got everybody else at the bottom. And what do we do as humans? We look up. We look up to see what are the people above us doing? What are the behaviours they are exhibiting? So the role modelling is incredibly important in organisations, because where is it going to have the greatest impact? At the top. It has got to come at the top, because otherwise you're asking people to behave in a way that they are simply not seeing elsewhere in the organisation. And that is much, much harder for them to do. So we know role modelling is really, really important. Next, what do people mean when they actually talk about flexible work? Again, we analysed the data. We broke down all the individual sentences, we coded them, we drew out the themes. And it turns out that flexibility isn't about time and place. For parents, they want autonomy. And for managers, they want predictability. So actually, we have two stakeholder groups who are pulling in naturally different directions around this. But actually, what's lying underneath even that? And the thing that they have in common is trust. So parents want to be trusted that they will do their job and that they can do their job. And managers want to be able to trust their teams that they will deliver. They will do what the manager is being held accountable to deliver. So trust is actually at the core of successful flexible working. And again, this shouldn't surprise us. So, you know, when our children come to us and want to do something differently, for example, they want to cut the apple by themselves, or the other end of the spectrum, they want to stay at the party till midnight. And, you know, they're sort of pushing against the boundaries of what we're used to and what's comfortable for us. And so we might say no, or it might be that we just don't have time to think about it properly that day. And so we say no, and they turn around and they say, well, don't you trust me? And it's no different that when somebody is coming to talk about flexible work, as a parent, what they're actually coming and saying to you is, do you trust me to do my job? And so if you say no to flexibility, you're saying, no, I don't trust you. And I think when we understand that, we can start to have very different conversations about how work could be for parents and for managers. So let's move on to Ram's story. So, brilliant. So Ram was a father that we spoke to through the listening programme. It's not his real name. We use pseudonyms for people. I'll tell you a little bit about him. So he works in banking, and he's got two beautiful children. His wife works full-time, and so he takes primary caring responsibilities for his children. And he wanted to be with his children before and after school when they're in primary school. So he reduced his working hours from 40 to 34 hours a week. It was a 15% reduction in time, so he took a 15% reduction in salary. He also got demoted from senior manager to manager. What does Ram think of this? So what Ram said is the only annoying part as a working parent is if you have aspirations to progress, your career is on hold because flexible hours don't allow you to do the bigger roles. So that's the only annoyance I have with it. Yes, there is a negative in terms of career progression, but it's outweighed by the benefit of being there with your kids. And what does being with his kids actually mean for Ram? The reason I'm comfortable with this, he says, and I'm very clear, is you have a window when your child wants to hold your hand. We hold hands on the way to school. We have a kiss at the playground. These are nice moments as a parent, but they won't want to do it forever. So I'm very clear in my mind that success for me is maximising my time with my kids whilst maintaining my career. So it sounds as if Ram is pretty happy with the situation he finds himself in. And there are people who will hear Ram's story and think, well, come on, Jess, what do you expect? His priorities have changed. This is utter madness. And what we found bewildering is that time and time again, parents tell us that they willingly accept the stagnation or the rolling back of their career as the price they will pay to hold their child's hand. And when we enable people to accommodate the needs of their family alongside the needs of their job, because there isn't the role modelling, because there isn't the trust, because it hasn't been normalised, they don't expect anything else. And they're so thankful that they can keep their job and feel like a competent parent, that they don't ask for any more. And so holding their child's hand is so important, they will take the pay cut. And holding their child's hand is so important, they will take the demotion. And holding their child's hand is so important, can we change this slide? Because the time to hold their child's hand is now. So is this a problem? The fact is, they will take almost any deal an employer gives them, so they can hold on to enough of their career without letting go of their child's hand. And I think we can do better. So from the organisation's perspective, it's some really curious decision making they've had. So at some point, somebody went out and spent quite a lot of money to find Ram, and they thought he was really good. So they brought him in, and they then spent even more money on him. They trained him up, they promoted him, more money. And then for some reason, he became a dad. And the fact that he stepped up and said, you know what, I can't guarantee I can be in a meeting between 3 and 5. For some reason, that was more important than all of the investment they've made in him so far. So it's not making sense from an organisational perspective. Ram sounded quite happy about it, but let me tell you a little bit more about Ram's day. Ram described his day to us. Can we go on to the next slide? Next one. And you can see it here. So from 7 in the morning till the kids are at school, he's with the kids. 9 till 3, he works, picks the kids up from 3 o'clock, doing clubs, tea, bedtime till 7:30. And he's stacking the dishwasher, he tells us, from 7:30, putting the washing in, all of the sort of household chores till 9 o'clock. And then he's working again from 9 till 11. What do you notice?
Still time for him.
There is no time for him, and his hours have not changed.
Yeah.
He is still working 40 hours a week. He has taken the pay cut, he has taken the demotion, and he is still delivering 40 hours a week for that business and being grateful for the opportunity to do so. So this is what I mean in terms of these things being insidious. And I think part of the challenge that we face in tackling these barriers is actually helping people to see them. So what we do at From Another is we take these insights and we use them to develop courses and tools so that we can enable parents to develop the mindsets and the skill sets they need to tackle these things. So our course, the Reset Course for Parents, starts next week. And a good example from that is, how do you combine these two things? And one of the parents said to me, she said, it's just such a relief that you're not telling me I need to get better at time management. Because what we actually do is we support them to interrogate and explore some really foundational concepts we have in the UK. So the first is the concept of the ideal worker. So an ideal worker in the UK, you are expected to be available at all times and you are expected to meet all the requirements of your employer. Pretty tough ask. We then explore the concept of the ideal parent, which again in the UK is that you will meet all the needs of your children. These two things are incompatible. So it's not that you as a dad cannot do this. It's not a question of competence. You're being asked to do something within a system, within structures that you cannot succeed in. And when people understand that, their sense of agency and their sense of self-efficacy actually shifts because they have a better understanding of the context in which they're operating and therefore what are the choices they can make. And that puts parents on a completely different footing about the choices that they make. So I hope that has been really helpful in terms of just giving an insight into the way that we do things. And I'd love to hear your reflections and anything else I can share with you.
No, thank you, Jess. That was fascinating. Going back to that last slide, I mean, as somebody who works every hour God sends as a member of Parliament because you are on duty seemingly 24 hours a day, particularly in the world of social media, where your constituents can get hold of you no matter what. Actually having some you time is really important. So I'm a kinship carer, I look after my grandson, who's 4, he's just started school. I love my Monday mornings because I can now take him to school on a Monday, and Fridays I take him and pick him up, and that's wonderful. Missing dreadfully throughout the week, it is the curse of this place, because there's no easy way of managing families, and we've always decided with our own children and with Lyle that actually it's better for them to be brought up in the constituency. It's a better quality of life than dragging everybody down to London. But you do miss them, and certainly with my own 3, I missed them dreadfully during the week, and then when they were fighting amongst each other back when I was at home, I did wonder what I missed on them. But you do need you time as well, and looking around, certainly from 7:30 when the kids are in bed, yes, you do your household chores, you stack the dishwasher and all of that stuff, but actually up till 11 o'clock when you go into bed, you need a bit of downtime yourself, otherwise you just
absolutely.
I would also add the me time, but also the time to continue to flourish that, or to nurture the bond between the parents.
Yes.
Because some things drop in the mix. And sometimes it can feel like, well, what am I going to drop here?
Yeah.
And there can be an over-reliance on the other parent, and say, this might be a little hard for 15 years or so while we're nurturing this child here, but can we ride through this? And if that's not explicit, if that's not explicit and an agreement, that can lead to a lot of dysfunction over time. And then I can well imagine you wake up one day and you say, who are you? And actually, who am I?
Actually, when I said me time, it's actually us time. I value the fact that when I'm in Parliament, I obviously don't just not see my children or grandson, don't see my wife either.
No.
And when you get Lyle to bed, and it's me and Alison, and we might even just have a glass of wine watching Netflix, but it's time that you're together, and that is absolutely crucial. And certainly, she has a heavy burden during the week because she's effectively a single mum. And I'm very aware of that. That's the agreement we've come to. It's also a really lonely existence down here for me on my own. When they talk about a family-friendly farm, that's fine. My family's 280 miles up north. No hours are family-friendly for me because I just go back to four walls in a flat, be on my own.
So, what's interesting is Microsoft brought out data over the summer, which correlates with this experience. So they can obviously mine all the, in feeds they're getting in from Outlook and Teams. And again, if you go on to this, sorry, Charlotte, on the last slide, there's a QR code which takes you to a page, and that's talking about what we're talking about here today. And you can get our first report on the flexible working listening programme. But the Telegraph reported on this. And I think one of the things that's really dangerous is that it's actually starting to be termed the lull, that from 4 o'clock till 9 o'clock in the evening is the lull, and people are logging back on to work at 9 o'clock. Well, which working parent would describe 4 o'clock till 9 o'clock in their day as a lull? But again, I think we need to be really careful that we challenge this language. And when I was speaking to the journalist, I said, please, if there's any way we can get the editor to move away from the term the lull, that would be really helpful, because otherwise we've got another case we've got to prove that it's not the lull. This is the busiest part of the parent's day. This is a really, really important time in a family schedule. That this is not them sitting back, going off to play a round of golf and then logging back on at 9 o'clock.
I think it's really also interesting to think about the RAM schedule that we've just seen, and think about the effect of a parent living that sort of existence, frazzled life on the early years. If you're thinking about the welfare of the child, we're talking a lot about parents and how they can manage, but think about the child who is in that not lull, should we call it, period that we all know. And they can sense that frazzled
Yeah.
person rushing about. And as you say, Chris, you know, the parents themselves, when you're in that zone, it can be very easy to get snappy, and all. So there's all those effects on the early years as well. I'm thinking about that.
And what's interesting with Ram and some of the other parents that we talk to, yes, Ram is working those additional hours in the evening, but as he told us his story, he was confident he had permission to step away from that 3 o'clock onwards. Other parents we hear from feel they don't have permission to do it.
Yeah.
So they are rushing out, grabbing the kids from school, coming home, and then have this scenario where they have the kids at home and they're trying to work, which again, who is winning? Who is this benefiting? So I think that, you know, the more that we can do to tackle some of these structural barriers to really help people understand the context. No, it's not.
As you say, you do feed off
Completely.
the kind of energy and angst that you're giving. And, you know, as a parent, you say the kids are playing up. Well, they're not playing up. They're actually reacting to the scenario that you presented them with. And they want a bit of attention. And dad's at home, so why can't I have the attention? The fact that dad has a million other things to do because of the pressure of work and it's got to be all done by yesterday, you know, and those two things are incompatible, aren't they?
Yeah.
You've got to
Yeah.
really separate yourself from that.
Yes.
Give
Yeah.
give your child the attention that they want and need.
We have two questions and a comment from the chat. So, we just had a third. So the comment I want to start with from Tim Soper. Hello, Tim, by the way. I have a daily reminder in my calendar at 9 p.m. that says work cut off. Message I'm sending myself is it's important to stop now for yourself and your wife. So thank you for that, Tim. A question from Debs Ingham. Thanks, Jess. Particularly like the research insights. Did you talk to working parents in a range of roles and family situations? I'm wondering if you heard similar or quite different stories for fathers where dropping hours wasn't an option financially, or for single fathers who arguably had less flexibility. So that's one question. And the second question, question from Jess again from Tim. What would be a key message to every employer in the UK, i.e. an action that can be taken tomorrow? I'll answer that, Tim. It's duvet day tomorrow for everybody.
Okay, so first question. Great question. We went away and we checked our stats actually on the listening programme. And our breakdown, for a start, just between mums and dads, was about 65% mum and 35% dad. So we've got work to do in terms of reaching a more equitable split in terms of the conversations that we're having. The thing that we absolutely recognise is that what we're really good at the moment is reaching professional middle-class families. They are very, very easy to reach for us, and they are confident in articulating their story. So what we're doing is we're working with partners to see how can we get to different groups of parents. And in order to, what we want to do, because we want to transform, we want to reach 1 million families by 2030. And to do that, we're building the most inclusive listening programme in the UK for parents and managers. And we're focusing on inclusivity rather than scale, because I could talk to 5,000 parents, but if they all have the same type of job and they all live in sort of the same types of homes and they sort of all have the same educational levels and they sort of all have the same income values, and actually I'm only hearing one story. And I think, you know, Chris and I have been talking about, we need to think about how do we ensure that as we are championing these changes, that we don't actually bake in social immobility that we currently have in the UK. Because it's a very easy business case in industries where you have high value competitive labour markets. So your people are really important to you and you have to compete with other organisations to get the best talent you have. So things like tech, things like banking, things like consulting, you know, we see Deloitte doing incredible stuff for working parents. So, you know, when Chris grows up and joins Deloitte, he's probably going to be okay. But actually, when Tim, I'm sorry if there's anyone called Tim here, but when Tim goes and, you know, is a brilliant builder and is amazing at what he does, how do we ensure that actually, you know, they are as equally important in their families and to their children. So that's why it's so important for us that we build this listening programme around that inclusivity, and we'd love to work with all of you sat around this table to make that happen. Yeah. We would love to speak to them. We would absolutely love to speak to them. The other piece that we're doing was that we're also expanding our cohort. So we've started with working parents because that's what we live and breathe ourselves. But over the next 12 months, we're going to be expanding to include over 50s and Gen Z, so that actually for employers, we can enable them to support an individual in their organisation, whichever life stage they're at. And again, focusing on the commonality that people have, rather than putting them into buckets, putting them into silos, saying actually, as human beings, these are the experiences we share. We value trust, we value connection. And I think that again is trying to challenge some of those structural barriers that have come out of some of the work that's been done over the last 20 years.
It is worth talking to kinship carers though, because the immediacy of your world being turned upside down is huge. If you're a family that has decided to have a child, tried for children, become pregnant, you've got months to plan what your life is going to be like ahead of you. If the social services stuff just drops a baby on your doorstep one day, as they did to B and Alison, your life changes overnight. Yeah. And so there is a cohort of parents, in inverted commas, out there for whom their life is transformed immediately with no real opportunity to plan. And you know, some of the flexibility issues that you've spoken about there, computer says no, because the legislation's not there. I couldn't believe it when I went to see Mr. Speaker to ask him if I could have paternity leave. Wasn't such a thing when I was a father first time round, and said, I'm sorry, but kinship doesn't qualify. If it was your own child, or if you were adopted, you could have it, but as a kinship carer, you can't. But I've become a dad again overnight, you know.
Child requires the kinship parent not to go.
Yes, to build that bond.
Their employment, they're required to leave. And so basically, children's services writing letters to their employers saying they've got to go, they need universal credit. And then when you've been out of the working environment, you're trying to go back, now caring for a small child that might be of nursery age when your other children are all adults.
There's a really good linking point that goes back to these principles again around what the needs of the parents or whoever's caring for them really important. The way the law is structured around the child is paramount in all of this. So we should be attaching our policies to the way we set up our laws around what's best for the children and for the service. The parents need to do that. I think one point to chip in on as well, having this sort of great presentation so far. Really interesting points, and thanks as well for something at the end about highlighting some of the inequality issues that you still need to go on to tackle around the gender split in your study group, the representative group, and how we can better understand that, as well as some of the demographics around income, different types of job. We support, for example, the future men who have maybe less less well paid, less agency around what kind of jobs they choose. Employers aren't competing so hard for their time. Then left with fewer choices about kind of what they can do, the flexibility, depending on the relationship status, non-resident parents as well, who may have very high kind of commitments when they have access to their children spending time. And also financial burdens around making sure that they can meet their legal requirements and their moral requirements to their children. they don't have the same choices, they
No.
don't have the same ability
Yeah.
to kind of exercise a choice. Therefore, I wish I could spend more time, but we have got a really stark choice to make. Sometimes it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Sometimes not have any potential. Like your case study, might be because of that or just because of personal preference. The dads who were seen to be a certain type, fitting a certain type of stereotype, are actually, this is my way into work. So dad, one child in a buggy, one strapped to his chest, one holding his hand on the way to the school run. And this is a guy in a diverse part of London, from some background where people might assume a guy like that, we wouldn't see him doing that kind of, but he was completely unfazed. It was clearly his routine. So we have to remember within this those things, and some of the constructs that we're given within the workplace and within the family are what we need to pick apart.
Yes.
So the statistics have shown that big firms know that this is affecting their bottom line, so they're doing something about it. A bit like the working dads employers report that you posted, which show great firms doing great work, but it's because principally it's driven, because they'll lose the best staff. Right? And so, but that culture that you showed in Rand's case, which is real, unfortunately, still so prevalent. All of a sudden he finds himself demoted. He's still doing all the hours. He's still doing all the work.
But what's shocking is that he doesn't see it.
Yeah.
This is how insidious it is. You know, that and that's the hill that's ahead of us. That's what we're trying to climb up.
And it's balancing the statistical financial impact, which the big focus is, versus the moral impact.
Yes.
And I think that's where, in our changing society, where we don't have such clear moral guidance, we don't have the beacons of spiritual or religious institutions saying this is the way families should set up. We look within ourselves for our moral approach should be. So we should be kinder to each other and ourselves, and actually look at our colleagues and say, I understand. I don't penalise you, become a bit frustrated. We should be creating a much better culture, whilst espousing the benefits to all of us, including primarily the children, but our future kind of national income, potential earnings. We look at our partners in Scandinavia and other parts of Europe who are embracing these more inclusive working practices. Their financial kind of plotting graph of where they're going to be in 5 or 10 years. Unfortunately, they just do better than us.
Yes.
So we need to kind of jump from those.
And they're healthier and happier as well.
Long lived.
Well, this is the shocking. I mean, there was new data that came out from UNICEF this week, wasn't there, about parents?
Yeah.
And you know, it's almost staggering. But you know, if sometimes it feels as if we have come so far. You know, we have so many more progressive policies in a lot of organisations, but actually the lived experience of parents continues to decline. They continue to feel under higher and higher and greater stress.
And
So our current approach does not work.
Our younger generations are seeing the stresses.
And they don't do it.
And we're talking about generations where it's just a gap of 10 years, for example, working generations as opposed to chronological ones. And they're saying, I don't want to enter into that, right?
Yeah. No.
We have a couple of other questions. Well, we have many others. And just what I suggest is that we harvest these questions, support, bring them over to you. So from Tim, did the research suggest that barriers to flexibility was different for men and women?
So I don't have a strong enough answer for you at that point. So again, as we continue to build the listening programme, as we get a greater pool of data, then we will be able to bring more robust findings to you on that.
Okay. Oh, and also Tim has rightfully pointed out, I'm not sure if the question about one action for tomorrow was ever answered.
Right. Well, I was having some time to think about that.
Very strategic.
Can I give you two things, Tim? So the first one, you've got to have a long, hard look at what's happening at the top of your organisation. And you've got to have a really frank conversation about what is actually going to be achievable in your organisation, given whatever the behaviours might be that you have at the top of that organisation. So I think that is something somebody could go and start to do tomorrow. The other, I think beyond that, I think one of the mistakes that we see organisations is actually trying to do this too quickly. And actually what we see organisations do is trying to find a bucket that I can put all of these problems into. What was the latest one? 4-day week. Let's just have a 4-day week and that's going to make everything better. What organisations need is they need frameworks that can accommodate all of the nuance of people's lives and their families, and that there can be a place for each family's unique context and situation.
And that takes more than going in and doing that tomorrow. I think the other thing, though, for organisations to understand is this point around trust. And I think actually, even if you've switched in your head that every time somebody is asking you about flexible work, actually they're asking you about trust. How will that change the conversation you then have? And the thing about trust is that trust, if you get into trust, you can actually tap into how people feel. And so you can move from having a conversation about flexible work and how someone does their job to actually having a conversation about how does somebody feel in this organisation. And if you can get into that, you can unlock all the potential of the people in your organisation. And I saw a wonderful phrase this week, which was that your people are the only appreciating asset on your balance sheet. You know, that is the only thing that you can invest in and will continue to appreciate and value in your entire organisation. So actually, I think changing that mindset that actually flexibility is about trust, and therefore you need to have a different conversation about it, I think would shift the types of solutions people are looking to create.
And also, I think we've had these conversations about, you know, it is really hard to get this right as an employer. I mean, there are many employers that when we were speaking at Unleash, they want to get this right. They know that their sort of blanket approach doesn't necessarily work. And we had lots of input from different organisations who have different things that they're trying to do, and maybe a one size fits all. So I think having a think about generally that the messaging from the organisation to employees with a little bit of sort of humility and honesty about the fact that this is hard. We want to make this work. Let's have an open conversation about this. And so I think it's about the approach to this rather than this is what we can do right now, and just say it is hard. We are trying to make it work. Let's talk to each other, back to the listening. Yeah. So I think that sort of honesty and also showing a bit of humility, I think you tend to get a much better rapport, and it's building that rapport with your employees, because I think most people would understand that it's really hard also for business owners and small businesses and things like that to get this right. So I think it does go both ways as well.
Yeah.
I've only seen one about chief executive, it was Co-op, and she took 3 months off working unpaid leave. She had a son doing his GCSEs and a son doing A-levels. And she took sort of, I think, April, May. Yeah. She just took completely off. You wouldn't think normally a chief executive would do that, but she said that was absolutely important to
Only
leave.
chief executive could afford.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just put it on top, you know, and she said we have that available for our staff as well to do the same. And I make sure that I fit my work around my kids' GCSE exams when they wanted it a year ago when I was doing it 2 years time, saying I'm going to be there every time you got. I know when their exams are going to be. What help do you need with that exam?
Yeah.
I remember how stressed my kids were doing their GCSEs, and I'd be asking for 3 months in work.
Oh, please.
The groups that you're looking at. Absolutely. Yeah. There was something that came out last week from work and consulting in there, and talking about more people being able to work from home and changing perhaps for the work capability assessments with maybe a bit more stick than carrot. And I just think there's a bit of a risk there, because people have to be able to work from home with the right environment, the space, the digital skills to be able to do that. And I just think if they're sort of pushing people to that, at risk of losing money if they don't do that, then it's just something to think about.
I think that's really, I mean, yes, absolutely. We would love to be talking to disabled parents. I think the point around the skill set that you need for flexible work, again, is really important. So, you know, most people, if they are able to access flexible work, because we need to acknowledge that a lot of people can't, but people who can have generally been doing it for about 2 or 3 years. Now, if you had somebody coming into a new job, you know, coming out of university, starting a new job, You wouldn't expect after 2 years that they knew everything they needed to do that job well forever. So we need to be investing in those skills. And again, our research showed that 81% of managers said that managing flexible teams requires a different skill set, but only 44% have had training in it. So we've got huge skill gaps, which I think is starting to emerge around this too. So it would be really great to pick up that conversation.
Jess, can I thank you for your presentation? If there's any questions or comments that haven't been mentioned, can we get those to Jess and ensure that you have sight of those?
Right,
That
thank
would be
you.
great. But that was a fantastic presentation. It's given us so much to think about, and particularly for myself as a policymaker and lawmaker, how we improve the situation in the workplace and avoid lots of people living Ram's life, which, you know, on one level is great, he sees his kids and he's happy, but that is not a healthy life, to be working every hour God sends in between looking after your kids as well. So thank you for that. That brings us to the end of today's session. There will be future meetings and future men will be in touch in due course with details of the next session. A little bit of sad news from me, and I consider it sad, you might all be overjoyed. Well, the good news is I've been promoted, so I'm now the Shadow Minister of the State for Social Care. A big thing to try and fix in itself. But that means I've been asked to come off all-party parliamentary groups, which means that this will probably be my last APPG for Fatherhood as the chair. I will be assisting in trying to get a replacement. It's the least that I can do. And I will also be staying in touch because it is a subject that I'm incredibly interested in. Anyway, so, you know, please don't think that because I'm not able to be the chair that I all of a sudden stop being interested in these things. And who knows how politics changes. You're somebody today, nobody tomorrow, and I might be rejoining the APPG in the next shuffle because that's politics. But I just want to place on record before I rush off to a meeting about social care at 4:30. My thanks to Owen and to Future Men and to Charlotte for all the support you've given me in the 2 years, is it? Or is it 3? 2. Yeah. And I've been the chair, and that's not a vote, because I think we're adjourned. That's flexible working for you. We finished at 4:30. Except I've not, I'm still working like that. But thank you. And I'll make sure we get a good chair to replace it.
Found us with the quite a great lesson. So we thank you for your support on this, and these meetings, and related kind of events and forums as well, to social care department, and the new one we're going into still has great relevance.
Yeah.
Particularly to the families that this group knows to be most of. So having someone in the shadow for now, cabinet, speaking up on issues of kinship care and particularly fatherhood. So wish you well, and we're going to keep your shadow open.
Can I personally thank Griffin as well, not tech?
No, thank you. Right, I'm going to have to shoot now, but
Thanks so much.
for as long as you've got this route, you're welcome to. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
I think we are finished.